Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Heart Interviews with CI Heartland. And I am so excited today. We have the legendary Miss Judy Rosen. Hey, Judy, how are you?
Hi, Kathy. It's great to see you.
It's so good to see you. I was telling Judy a little bit before we got started that so many people are mentioning you in their interview. And I don't know if you know this, but you are so many people's mentor, including mine. I like to tell the story about when I got interviewed by the board years ago and how you were there. And so like everybody just has to mention you. So I just wanted to tell you that so that everyone loves you. So I'm excited. So let's get started. No one that I know of that's a community manager sought out to be a community manager when they grew up. So how did you first get started in the industry?
Well, you're absolutely right. Way back then, nobody had the goal of being a manager. Certainly not a community association manager, because my experience goes back to the late 70s. And that's a very long time ago. And it's probably way before some of the people who are chapter members were even born. But lo and behold, I did. I originally started out, I was going to be a school teacher and I was going to teach math. That was my life goal. Well, I ended up marrying accountants, so maybe that was my connection to math. But you're right, nobody even heard of being a manager, community association manager. But nowadays, there are people who actually take college courses to become community managers. And I think it was the second mother-child PCAM that was awarded. And the student was one of my students for the PCAM case study, and they were the second family connection. So there are others that actually start out to do this.
I didn't know that. That's interesting. I've never heard that. So I think that's great. That's great that there's, that connection where they're passing it on a little bit,
That's right. Well, mommy or daddy probably has a management company and they're looking to their future to pass it along.
Sure. Yeah. And get them educated from the beginning. Yeah. Yeah. That's great. So what was your first exposure to the community association management industry?
As I said, I started out in the 70s. I had gone back to work after having a little boy, and I stayed home for a couple of years. And at that point, I needed to go do something. And I ended up working for a real estate developer part-time while my little boy was in preschool. So it was like from 10 to 3 every day. And this was in Maryland, the DC metro area. And he developed only rental properties at that point. He also owned a management company, but I was strictly on the developer side. And I got a background in working with the architects and the accountants and the attorneys and the people, in construction and the people that developed communities, which really served me later in my years, especially when I moved to St. Louis, because I ended up working for 2 real estate developers. Make a long story short, I left and took a leave of absence when I delivered a second child, another little boy. I'm surrounded by boys. And when I came back to work after, I think I took a 3-month leave, I went to the management company rather than staying with the developer. And I was a manager for him. And it again was just his communities, which was rental properties. This goes back, 1980, 1982, those years. And I would say probably in the mid 80s, they started taking on management of other communities. And that was my first exposure to community association management. The other part of this is I lived in a condo, townhouse condo in Maryland, right outside of DC. And when I say that you meet lifelong friends in this industry, you certainly do. The attorney that represented the board and the association in a lawsuit against the developer for some faulty construction, that attorney is still a good friend, happens to live here in Arizona, and we get together often.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, well, it's true. But that was my first exposure to management of community associations.
So I know you were really involved in the DC Metro chapter, or Metro, Washington Metro chapter. So how did you start getting involved in CEI?
Well, I learned when I started doing association management, and there were not large-scale communities at that point. It was mostly either co-ops, which DC had its fair amount of cooperatives, or condo buildings. And I had taken a few courses through IREM, which is the Institute of Real Estate Management, way back when I was doing rental management for him. But I soon learned that there was a whole lot I didn't know about community associations. So I joined the DC chapter, and I just did things at the DC chapter level. And that's interesting how I got my next step up in this industry. I found myself newly single in the mid-'80s, 86, 87 era. I had 2 young children I had to raise, and I was still working for that management company, and I had joined CAI. And just by going to chapter events, you make a name for yourself, you get recognized. And when I decided that I really needed to make a living and not just work part-time at some fun thing, I got seriously involved at the chapter level in DC. And that in 87, 88, somewhere around there, I changed jobs. And a management company was advertising for 2 different positions. One was a community manager, and I would have a portfolio. And the other position, they were looking for a VP to oversee their entire management department, which was only about 25 or 30 properties at that point. And they had a total of 4 managers. And lo and behold, I got myself an interview, and the owner of that company remembered meeting me at a CAI event. I walked away from that interview having been offered the VP management.
How exciting was that?
I was floored because I still knew nothing, but I guess my name was being tossed around and he recognized me, and that's how I got the position.
Wow. So then from there, did you start getting like the CEI education and all of that? Because I mean, you had it all. Yeah.
At that point, I was still just doing events at the chapter level. I wasn't involved at all in national, although national's office, was 20 minutes from where my office was, because they were in Northern Virginia and I was in Bethesda, Maryland. So it was very convenient, but I didn't really get involved with national for a couple of years. I just did the local programs. And the more I did locally, the more I realized I needed more if this was going to be a career. Yeah. And I think it was right around the end of 89, I got a phone call from the owner of the largest management company in the DC metro area that specialized in community association management. I wasn't seeking to make a change. He knew me from just going to chapter events. And lo and behold, they were really taking off, and they wanted a vice president of business development. I still managed a community or two, but my real strength was in bringing in new business. And he called me. How could you say no to somebody seeking you?
Yeah.
And that's really when I started to get, I need some education. And I started doing 2 of the Pmdp classes, the M100 and the M203, I think was the first 200 level class I took. And so there I was at the largest management company. I grew their portfolio from maybe around 50 communities to over 100 when I left.
Wow.
I worked for them almost 10 years, the whole 90s I was with them.
That's great. Great. So I know that, so you were, like you're really legendary on the national CEI level too. So how did that come about? How did you, start teaching and really become the president of CEI National at some point, and just all the involvement that you've done on the national level? How'd that happen?
Let me just correct you. I was never president of national.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were. I apologize.
Nope. I never really held an office at the national level, but I guess it was probably around 92, 93 when I was with this company. And I decided I really needed more education. And it took me about 18 months to go through all of the Pmdp classes so that I could sit for my PCAM exam.
That's fast. Wow.
Once I made up my mind, I did it.
Wow.
That was it.
Great.
And after I took the case study, the national executive director who preceded Tom Skiba, her name was Barbara Bird. And at that point, my name was Judy Bird.
Good, yeah.
And so we got confused a lot at national conferences. I could tell you other stories about that, but I was not Barbara Bird. And Barbara called me one day and said, I really would like you to do a training program at our office.
Wow.
For our office staff, which was very different. And I said, what type of program? She said, I want you to talk about a day in the life of a community manager. I said, oh, wow, I could really talk about that. So I did, and it was maybe an hour or an hour and a half class, and maybe there were 40 staff members that came, and their eyes were like wide open at the end. And so I asked the question, how many of you want to change and become a community association manager? And guess what? Not one person wanted to change careers. It is
not for everybody.
Right. It is a tough, demanding position, 24/7, 365.
Yeah.
And not only demanding, it's a thankless job. It is.
Wow, yes, yeah.
It takes a certain personality to be able to close the door, what you think is the end of the day. Of course, you're on call sometimes 24 hours a day. I mean, I remember one year, I managed a building that was a commercial building, and the bank was on the first floor, and they had recently converted their air conditioning and heating system from a wet system, and all the pipes were drained, to a more up-to-date system where it didn't run through the system. Well, it was Christmas Eve. It was about 9 o'clock at night. It was a cold spell in DC, and one pipe that they did not drain burst.
Oh.
In the vault of the bank. Well, try putting together an emergency team on Christmas Eve and 10 o'clock at night to clean up water. That's probably one of my worst experiences.
Wow.
Yeah. So Merry Christmas.
Oh my goodness. So let's change gears a little bit. So I don't know if most people know this, but you were the one that brought the idea for the manager appreciation reception to our chapter.
Yes,
So
I did.
yeah, so tell us a little bit about that, and is that one of your favorite events that we do?
It was by far my favorite event. And yes, I was responsible. I was on the program committee and I was responsible for suggesting it. And I worked on that every single year that I was in St. Louis.
Yeah.
And it was and still is my very favorite activity. And the reason that I feel it's so important is because managers do have thankless jobs.
Yeah.
And it's really nice to be appreciated.
Yeah.
So that's why I instituted it.
We were actually at Bristol's last night in that same room that we used to have it in. I was telling some of the newer members that maybe don't remember us doing the reception there. They're like, you did it in this room. I'm like, well, we weren't that big yet. We were still growing. So yeah, but yeah, the food there is always fantastic. So, good job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do you have a favorite CAI memory that you'd like to share? Probably lots of them.
My favorite CAI memory. Yes, unfortunately, it goes back to my DC days. It's not a St. Louis event.
That's okay. Yeah.
The Washington chapter was the largest. I think still is the largest.
They are.
Is it?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
New Jersey was just like a hair behind us. I don't know if there's still just a hair behind, but there was this camaraderie between the New Jersey chapter and the DC chapter. And once I got involved and started going to national events, every year, no matter where that national conference was, and there used to be 2 a year, one in the spring and one in the fall.
I didn't know that until last week when Marvin told me that. I didn't know there used to be 2, but I'm sorry, continue.
Okay. So I think it was a spring conference. It's about a year or 2 after I joined this very large management company that I went to my first national conference. And we developed this relationship with New Jersey. And there must have been 20, 30, 40 of us every year between the 2 chapters. And the night before conference, at every national conference, the 2 chapters had a private dinner. And it was called the Joke Off. And we would tell jokes. And we had some great storytellers on both chapters.
Wow.
And people were just hysterical, rolling off their chairs at dinner. And we did this for years and years, and it was called the Great Joke Off.
So now, do you still see some of those people? If you would go to a conference, are you still see some of them? Are they still involved in CEI?
Some of them are, several of them are. But we're old at this point, and not everybody is still as actively involved.
That's
but
true.
As I said earlier, I could pick up the phone or send an email to dozens of people, and I will get a response immediately.
Because everyone adores you, Judy.
It has nothing to do with that. It's relationship building.
Yeah.
And these are the people that saw me develop, and I saw them develop, and they've remained friends for a long, long time.
Yeah, that's great. So I know you're a huge supporter of CEI, always have been. So what would be if you were to encourage maybe a board to join CEI, what would you say to them? What would be your sales pitch?
My sales pitch is, it's a wealth of information. It's more information that you need to know. And there's no downside to being involved. It's to benefit you and your community.
Absolutely. That's great. Do you have a crazy story that you want to share about the industry or that you can share?
Yeah. I mean, there have been so many things like that Christmas Eve story I gave you.
That's a good one.
One of my funniest was when I was in St. Louis. I moved there in the end of 1999. And I stayed 16 years. So one of my stories was a building that I was managing, and it was downtown. And I sent an email to Marvin Notiff the very first thing the next morning. It was the first thing he opened. And the subject matter was naked man in lobby. I mean, you see everything, but apparently, and why this person opened his door in the early morning hours to get his newspaper, and it must not have been within arm's reach. So he had to step out, and the door closed behind him, and all he had was the newspaper. He went, believe it or not, went down to the lobby of the building to finish his sleep, laying on the sofa with the newspaper tented over himself.
Wow.
Well, we had no rule about being naked in the lobby, so we had to revise our rules, but I did give Marvin a good laugh.
Oh, that is a good one. That is a good one.
You never know what you're going to be faced with.
Exactly. Do you want to tell our members something that they might not know or expect about you that you want to share?
Well, I would say that there's more to life than managing. And I never thought I would live in a condo association ever again. Well, here I am in Scottsdale, Arizona, living in a condo association. It's very frustrating sometimes to keep my mouth shut, but I try my very best. And every manager has a different approach, a different way of doing things.
Yeah.
And sometimes I just have to bite my tongue, go in the bathroom and cry my tears. And, people do things differently. And I'm not always happy with the end result, but I'm not going to change people's behaviors.
Yeah, that's a good takeaway for sure. I don't know if I'd ever live in a condo association.
Well,
we know too much information, right?
That's right. I was never going to live here, but let me tell you, the type of community that I live in and the passion that my husband and I have for travel, it is the best because they bring in the mail, they take care of your apartment when you're gone.
Good.
It's just terrific.
That's good. That's great. So now comes the time where we do some rapid fire questions if you're ready. Are you ready?
You betcha.
Okay.
Rapid fire.
What is your favorite St. Louis restaurant?
Well, I have to mention 3.
Yes. Oh, good. Even
One
better.
you mentioned already is Bristol's.
Yeah.
I cannot find those crab cakes anywhere here in Arizona. Actually, last year on New Year's, we shipped in crab cakes from Maryland, and having lived in Maryland, 30 years almost, I didn't think anybody would ever have as good crab cakes, but Bristol's crab cakes.
Yeah, I know.
So, number 1. Number 2, my very favorite restaurant is in Clayton, and it's called The Crossing.
I've been there. I'll try that one.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Special occasion. I love food. I love to cook. That is by far perfect.
Okay. So what should I get if I go there? What's
Their
your
menu probably changes often, Kevin.
Okay.
And number 3, I'm not a huge meat eater, but if I were going to go for a steak, I'd be at 801 Chop House.
Mm.
So I have an allegiance to 801.
Good selections. When you are in St. Louis, or when you lived here, what was your favorite attraction that you'd like to go see? Like, what would if someone like isn't from St. Louis, what would you tell them to come see?
The Arch.
Yeah.
There is, and I've traveled a lot. There is nowhere in the world that has this landmark. And I live in a building called the Landmark, by the way. The landmark, the signature of St. Louis is the Arch. The view from on the ground, looking up and just flying in and looking down, it's magnificent.
It is.
It's not so great once you're inside and you have to look through these teeny little windows and to look down.
And take the elevator going up. That's no fun either. Yeah.
Yeah, that's not fun either. You're right.
Yeah.
It's a little shaky and scary. But the view from the ground up or the air down, can't beat it.
Yeah, I agree. Do you have a favorite hobby that you want to tell us about?
Cooking. I used to teach cooking before I got into the management. Well, no, my kids were young. So I was, I guess, working for the real estate developer, and then my first job in association management.
Okay.
I would be the woman in Bloomingdale's teaching a class, eating the food I loved and still do. I have a passion for food.
Yeah, me too. So what would be your signature dish that you love to make?
Oh my gosh.
It's a hard one, I know.
Reservations now. That's my signature. But I don't know. I've been into veal marsala recently.
That sounds good. Yeah.
I think my very favorite dessert is I do this blueberry tart.
Ooh,
that doesn't have any cream. It's just the crust and blueberries. And I think that's probably my signature dessert.
That sounds really good.
Well, come visit and I'll make it.
Okay. Deal.
All right.
Do you have a favorite place you and Howard have traveled to? That's a hard one because Judy's traveled all over. So that's a hard one.
Yes. There's nowhere like it. And I've been to 52 different countries so far. Soon to be 53. Well, next summer, 53. There is nothing to compare with going on a safari in Africa. And we went to Kenya. We stayed at 3 different safari camps in Kenya. And then we went down to Cape Town in South Africa. There is nothing in the world that will give you that experience.
Wow.
So,
that's a good one.
Definitely Africa.
Okay. Do you have a favorite PMDP class?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I was not licensed, but I was approved to teach the M201, which is maintenance. And I find that very funny that I was teaching maintenance. But, well, I could give you a quick little story if you have a second.
Sure, yes.
When Howard and I met and he said, I want you to know I'm moving to St. Louis. And I said, St. Louis? I've never been to St. Louis. And we got, moved in. We bought a house in St. Louis and we're deciding, what am I bringing from my house in Maryland? What's he bringing from his house in Ohio? And we're down to the nitty gritty. And I said, oh, should I bring my toolbox? And Howard said, toolbox? Like, if you think we need one, you better bring it because I have no tools. He literally had 2 screwdrivers and 1 hammer.
Wow.
So we still have my toolbox. It has a lot more in it now, but
That's good.
Yeah, you asked me something and I diverted. What was your question?
What's your favorite PMDP class?
So the case study by far, which I started facilitating, I think right after I moved to St. Louis. I was only approved to teach the 201 and the 203, which I love, the 203, but doing the case study, and the managers have been through all of the coursework, they're just doing the case study. It's marvelous to watch and to see how their minds work and to read their submissions. So the last maybe 8 to 10 years, all I did was case studies.
Wow. That's a lot of reading though for you, but that's great that you love it though, but
it's a lot of prep work too.
Yeah.
It's really a challenge. And the only reason I'm not still doing it is when they went virtual with COVID. And I didn't think I would be very effective in coordinating that.
Yeah. It's been hard. A lot of things have changed with COVID, right? Yeah.
I will tell you one thing. I am not unhappy that I don't manage during COVID. That's a challenge.
Yeah, kudos to all the managers that have hung in there through all of it. So I know it's been challenging for sure.
Absolutely.
What piece of advice, last question, what piece of advice would you give to a community manager that's just kind of starting out and kind of maybe a little intimidated by getting the education with CEI? What advice would you give to them?
Get involved at the chapter and national level. Get your credentials and write your own ticket. Because once you have that PCAM, you can take it not only anywhere in this country, you can take it almost anywhere in this world. The industry has grown so very much that you can just write your own ticket. Don't be afraid to take a chance, because they'll be looking for you. I didn't look for my last job. They found me.
Yeah. So on that note, I know we were talking before we started recording about your hairdryer incident this morning. So I want you to share that, because that was priceless what you said. So tell us a little bit about that.
So I said to Kathy, believe it or not, on the day that I'm doing this interview, my hairdryer died. And I should have had a hint, because it stopped for a few seconds yesterday, but I got it going again. And Kathy said, "Oh no, your hair looks great." And I said, "Well, yeah, because I have 3 hair dryers, one in my guest room and one is the backup. So I didn't have to run out and buy a new hair dryer. I just had to go to a different bathroom." But
I told her, I'm like, wow, you were really prepared. And she goes, a community manager always has to be prepared.
Right, no matter what. I used to have so much stuff in the trunk of my car. I even had a snow shovel in the trunk of my car, because one of the buildings I managed in St. Louis, that developer absolutely did not want a speck of snow on his walkways. And he even had the sidewalk and the circular drive heated during the snow. We turned on the heat so it would turn to water. And the very first snowstorm we got, I drove in from Chesterfield down to Clayton with a snow shovel in the trunk of my car and shoveled snow, because we got so much. Yep,
dedication.
Prepared.
Well, Judy, thank you so much for doing this. We miss you. And anything else you want to tell the group before we end the interview?
I miss everybody in St. Louis. I loved being there. A few years ago, I was brought in for a program, and I'm on schedule.
I know. Yes.
Next year to do another panel discussion.
Yeah, so it'll be through Zoom though. It'll be a webinar. But yeah, look for Judy next. I think it's sometime in the spring. I think, right?
I think March maybe.
Yeah. Well, we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you for doing this. Thank you
so much, Kathy. I've loved doing it.
Yes, and we loved having you do it. So thank you for being a mentor to so many and for everything that you've done to help our chapter grow in the early years. We appreciate you.
Thank you, sweetie. Take care. Bye, everybody.
Bye. See everybody next time.